Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of When I Grow Up. On today's episode, it's my pleasure to welcome a friend that I met long ago and just recently connected with today, Gabe Aoyoung. Hi, Gabe, how are you?
Good. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. How long has it been?
I want to say like 10 years. I mean, it's been last time I saw you, I think we were on like a dance team.
Yes.
And we were getting down with like students at Georgia Tech.
That's right. That's right. So we were just talking about before we started recording. David, my husband, is in the same graduating class as Gabe. But that's my memory of you, Gabe, is like you were a great dancer, hip hop dancer, and not only that, like your ability to mobilize people was always like inspiring for me. So like truly, I'm excited to hear. Like I'm shocked that you're not doing dancing professionally, are you?
No, I wish. My body can't move like it used to.
Well, Gabe is here to tell me more about what he does, and you guys, I actually on purpose didn't have him explain anything to me. So all of this is fresh for me too. So Gabe, without further ado, what is it that you do?
All right. It's a little long-winded, so we'll take it any way you want to go.
Sure.
But I'm a director, a chief of staff for the chief technology architect at PayPal, specifically for the enterprise architecture and platform experiences team.
Okay. I'm excited to unpack this a little bit. Okay, my first thoughts, okay, before you start explaining. Okay, in my head, the term chief of staff is, something I think of when I think of the president, right? Like chief of staff is like the second to the president or their chief of staff, right? And it's like they do it all.
Yes.
They do it all. Okay, so you're chief of staff to who now?
The chief technology architect for the company. And at PayPal.
Okay.
And you're exactly right. Chief of staff is kind of like second in command, like the doppelganger or like the shadow of whoever's in command, whether it's the president, whether it's the CEO, whether it's the CTO, or in this case, the chief architect. And what my boss, the architect, oversees is the enterprise architecture and platform experiences organization.
Okay. Again, just pretend like I know nothing because I don't know anything. Because these are all new terms to me, but this is so exciting. I'm so excited. Like, by the way, congratulations. What a great job.
I guess. I mean, I like it. It's fun. It's a lot of work. But yeah, let's dive into it. So I usually let, I guess, the person asking the questions choose. Do you want me to talk about the role first, or do you want me to tell you about what our org does? Because they're both kind of go hand in hand. I could start either way. Let me start with the org. You know,
yeah, let's talk about the org. Yeah,
because then it'll make like the day to day and like what I do a little more real.
Okay.
Okay. So let's unpack and ask questions, interrupt. Love this to be interactive.
Yes.
A lot of terms that I never heard about until I got this job anyway. So enterprise architecture is kind of a fancy way of saying software engineering.
Okay.
But it's at a different level. So let's just say you're a software developer. Chances are you have to design a system, you have to design some code, you have to design an application, what have you, right? An architect is kind of the person who does that designing. Not many people think of architect in the sense of software. They think like, oh, I'm making a building, right? But architecture actually is a very big deal in software development. What kind of database you choose, what kind of interface you choose, what belongs in the front end, what belongs in the back end. All of that stuff is an architect's responsibility. Enterprise architecture, now it's getting more complex, is looking at how systems interoperate and are designed amongst one another. So if you are at a local level, you're an architect for an application, you're kind of just looking at your little piece of code, your own domain, right? Okay, if you created a website, you're the architect for your website.
Okay.
Now, an enterprise architect is going to look at 5, 6, 7 different websites all together and say, well, this doesn't belong here. It should be over there. Or everyone's doing the same thing. Why not develop that in the same way and use some shared components so that way we can be more efficient, we could be more consistent, give a better customer experience. So the enterprise architecture is basically looking across the enterprise, looking at every piece of code, every piece of software that we develop, and looking for those efficiencies in the way things are designed, in the way things interoperate. And we try to be like that glue between all of these different systems.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot. Okay, so I'm like so amazed right now. I'm all I can think is, man, what kind of brain thinks like this? Because like I don't think I could do that. Like look at the bigger picture and try to like find the efficiencies and things like
Mhm.
that, and like the cross, I don't know, cross.
Yeah, cross-cutting functionality, like
Yes.
all
Okay.
that
Yeah.
stuff. Let me give like a really real example.
Yes,
So,
please.
did you know PayPal acquired Venmo back in like 2013?
No, had no clue. Okay.
Okay, a lot of people don't know, but this
Okay.
is a plug. Venmo is a PayPal product. So, but you know what PayPal is, right? Like it's
Yes.
this very old P2P like money sending system.
Uh-huh. I mean,
So
PayPal was, I feel like, the original
exactly,
money sending system through the internet.
that's right. If you didn't want to do a bank, you used PayPal,
Yeah.
right? That's how you
Yes.
sent money to your friends and family. Venmo is kind of the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when the acquisition happened in 2013, this is the moment the architect steps in and says, well, now we have $2 billion companies that do money transfer.
Mm-hmm.
So chances are you have a lot of redundant code. You have a lot of systems doing the same duplicative thing. So we're losing a lot of potential in terms of operating expenses by running both of those payments rails. So what if we took best in breed, let's just say it was PayPal's payments rails, and started running Venmo transactions through that instead? Then you can deprecate and sunset all of that Venmo infrastructure and use a properly scaled, well-designed payments rails to manage both of those brands.
And that would save you guys money too.
Totally. And it would make for a better customer experience. Like now you can interlink your PayPal transactions and your Venmo transactions. You could see them. What if you wanted to do like cross platform payments? Like if you
Yes.
wanted to Venmo me something to my PayPal account, now you could do that.
Wow. Okay, so that and then so an architect is the one that would kind of like conceive all of this
Yeah,
and bring it, and is he the one that like he tells a team and there's developers that do it, or he
exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. I'm like so amazed right now. It's so fascinating.
I get really like passionate about it too.
No,
And
I
it gets
love
really
it.
exciting. And when you're at a company like PayPal, which is extremely acquisitive, like we have Happy Returns, we have Honey, we have Braintree.
I don't
These
know
are
what you're saying right now, Gabe. What is
okay.
that?
Those are all different brands. You don't
Okay,
have to.
okay.
You've heard of Honey, right?
Oh,
It's like
no.
coupons in your browser.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just take that. Now you've got PayPal, you've got Venmo, you've got Honey.
Uh-huh.
And so there's common functionality for all of these. Like even at the most base level of software, like for example, you probably need something that alerts you if something goes wrong in any of these systems.
Sure.
Why would I use 3 different alerting mechanisms? Right? Why would I pay for these 3 different, vendors who do alerting? Like I should just use one set of observability tools to tell me if anything goes wrong across those systems. And if you dig into it, PayPal has acquired, 10s, 20, 30 different companies in its lifetime.
I see.
So there's so much opportunity for efficiency here.
I see. Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, I did not know that about PayPal, but that makes sense that you would need an enterprise architect to be able
Right.
to do that. Okay. Is there more? I'd like to get into your role specifically.
Absolutely. Well, there's one more part, which is
Yes,
the
yes.
enterprise platform experience.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so the best way to describe that is our team creates the tools that developers use to develop code. So you're talking like
What does that even mean?
you're like at the lowest level of the stack. I'll give a very easy analogy.
Okay.
We make the hammers and the screwdrivers for
Okay.
people to go build stuff.
And how does one do that?
It's like the most, I would say, complex level of engineering you can get, because like who's making software to develop software, right? Like
Yeah, that seems
it's
like
almost like
insane to
redundant,
me.
or it's almost like a feedback loop. But we have to create tools that make the developer experience easy and fast and accelerated. Let me put it in realistic terms. PayPal has over 10,000 engineers, right?
Okay, yes.
If everyone was using different variations of tools, it would be a mess. Like, let's take another real example of you're building a house, right? If you hired 10 different workers who use 10 different screw sizes or nail sizes, your house isn't going to be well designed. It's going to be a total mess.
Right.
So we need to provide some consistent tools, some reliable tools, so 10,000 engineers can all be productive, fast, have a good experience. We want developers to be happy. If there's anyone who's picky in this world, it's software developers. Like, they're going to be like, I need my tools to have this feature. Otherwise, I can't write code. Hands in the air, right? And
Okay, so like, is it kind of like everyone using Adobe Creative Suite?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
But it's like slightly lower on the stack, which is like the software that creates Adobe Creative Suite.
Yeah, right. So like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, you would be the one creating Adobe Creative Suite for people to be creative. Like
exactly.
Okay.
Like, you're going to make this podcast later. You're going to edit it up. But someone made the software to let you do that.
Right.
Exactly.
That's insane.
It's a pretty tough gig. I would just reinforce, like, engineers are so picky. Like, you as a creator, I'm sure you have like choices and options. Is it Adobe? Am I going to use Sony? Am I going to use Final Cut? Right. And all of these competitors are fighting to get your share of saying, I like using this product. So engineers are the same way. We have a wide variety of tools that we use every single day. There's so many open source tools also out there that are totally free. So we as PayPal want to extend some set of tools that we think are best, that we think best represents our company. That when a developer joins the company, they say, wow, the tools here are better than those at Google. Like, I can develop software so much better here, right? So that's also what our team does.
That's insane. Okay. So you are the chief of staff.
For the guy who oversees all that.
Oh my gosh, you're a busy man.
It's a little busy. So I think now we can get into the role.
Okay, so,
in the beginning, you said like the chief of staff is kind of the second in command. And that's very much true. I think my relationship with my boss is very special and very nuanced. A chief of staff is someone who basically can do everything the boss does and then some, right? If there's something my boss needs, he'll say, Gabe, can you take care of it? Whether it's writing some code, whether it's designing something, a presentation to senior leadership, you really do act as kind of the doppelganger or a force multiplier of your boss. In addition to that, you can't be a perfect copy. You kind of have to have your own opinion because you're also the confidant. You're the most trusted person on the executives team. So my boss will come to me one-on-one, ask some very intimate private stuff, like, should we let someone go? Or is this the right decision? Sometimes he may not have the clarity and want to use me as a sounding board. So I do need to bring my own opinion. I do need to be the person that he values in terms of my own opinion, in terms of my own thoughts, because he will use that to formulate his own decision.
Right. Wow. Okay. So like, you're saying that basically you do all the same, like, you are capable of doing all the same stuff that he does, as an architect and all these things. And on top of that, you are his sounding board. That's good. That's, honestly, Gabe, to me, it sounds really stressful, but I'm sure you love it.
It is pretty stressful. I mean, I still need to give my credit to my boss because naturally I can't do everything he does perfectly well.
Sure.
But I'm an extension of it, very much so. So, day-to-day responsibilities of the chief architect, one of the top executives, he can't go running around and having a conversation with the 500 engineers that report up to him.
Right.
A lot of people will use me as that back channel instead, as someone who's accessible, as someone who can be trusted, as someone who has kind of an in with the senior leadership. So very much so, like, I act in my boss's capacity in certain proxy situations when he can't make it. He only has 8 hours in a day, right? So why not make it 16 with the chief of staff, right? But it is fun, it's stressful, and it's very unpredictable.
Man, okay, so with that being said, I guess I was gonna ask, what does a typical day look like for you? But maybe there is no typical day.
There definitely isn't. I think that, the day starts with the calendar. and the calendar changes like on the fly overnight.
Mm.
Things will fly in from left field. Sometimes my boss's boss will say, for example, I need some metrics. I need some data on one part of the developer tool chain. Like, can you give that to me? And my boss isn't going to have the time to run around and gather that information. That'll be my responsibility. Or the day will start off with, hey, we have like a full day session to redesign our payment system. We need to rethink how we're like running card transactions, and we need to bring in the right subject matter experts. We need to bring in the right architects, and just have a design session. By the way, I can't be there, so you go do it. Right? Like that kind of stuff happens just on the fly.
Okay.
Or I mean, like there's so many random things that could happen. For example, hiring is a very big deal.
Right.
Everything you do is based on how good your team is, right? And I firmly believe, like, if I only had one good thing I was at, like if I could only be good at one thing in the world, it would be hiring, because then everything would be like taken care of. I could just hire the right people, right? So sometimes I spend the whole day just trying to help my boss through interviewing different people that we want to bring into the company, just monitoring things as they go along, crafting offer packages. Also means laying people off and having those tough conversations, trying to make our organization more efficient, right? So any of those topics can spring up from left field. It really does just depend on what's like a priority at that moment.
Wow. I mean, that really sounds very important. All of it. You're just so important. That's all I could think. But okay, like how does one become chief of staff to this very important person at PayPal?
I think and it's in a way I would say a coveted role. And they do exist in many large enterprises, like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the president. They're all going to have chiefs of staffs.
Sure.
So I guess one is making an effort to look for those jobs. You can search it up. I'm sure if you're on LinkedIn or Indeed or Glassdoor, like those job openings will exist. But the harder part is, how do you land the job?
Yeah.
And it's a kind of a toss-up. But I would say it goes back to, right, these roles are so nuanced that it depends on what your leader needs. And so when you look at a job description for a chief of staff who may be the CFO, let's just take an example, chances are you're going to have to do some finance stuff. So you better have a finance background. For this architecture role, my roots are as a software engineer. So I'm a better fit for a chief of staff or a chief architect.
Yeah.
I want to be able to understand the context of what my boss does, what kind of projects or strategic initiatives he wants to lead. So if I don't have that background, it's going to be harder. There's some other requirements, but it kind of goes to my journey, I guess, because, for example, some people may say you should have an MBA. You should have some understanding of business. And I learned it. I landed my first chief of staff role without an MBA. So I guess later I can dive into that and how that planned out. But I mean, some other skills that would be relevant are like strategic planning, familiarity, running an organization, financial hygiene, budget planning, leading large teams. And then, like I said, on top of all that, you need to have like those special, like nuanced skills, right? If it's a finance executive, you better know your finance. If it's an engineering executive, you better be a good engineer.
I feel overwhelmed because because I mean, I feel like you're right. It is a very coveted role. I feel like a lot of people would be gunning for a job like that. But for me, it's like, I'm just curious, Gabe, like, do you feel like you interviewed well, or like, do you know what I mean? Like, what is the inside scoop here? Because I'm sure there are a lot of software engineers, and coming out of a technical school, there are a lot of people that I'm sure could qualify for a job like this. But, is there any inside information? Did you say something that you felt like stuck with them, or?
So before I was the chief of staff for my current boss, I was also a chief of staff at American Express prior to PayPal. So I had another leader there, and that was actually my first gig as a chief of staff. You mentioned, what did I say during the interview? And so at the time, I was unemployed, I was job hunting, And I was kind of like throwing resumes everywhere, left and right. Like, the desperation of like being
Sure, yeah.
jobless, right?
Yeah.
So, I saw this posting. It's a chief of staff or an enterprise architect at American Express. And I said, why not? Like, I'll take anything at this point. I don't know what it means,
Okay.
right? Like, I was like where you're at. And, in the qualifications, it said you need an MBA, you need to be good at finance, you need to be good at blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know, whatever. I threw my resume in. So they called me up and they were like, hey, actually, we're like pretty interested in interviewing you. And I asked, oh, sure, like, why not? I questioned why. And when I went into the interview, my soon-to-be boss basically said, hey, I saw you have a very strong engineering background and you lack all this other stuff. It's pretty gutsy of you to like try to apply. So I was kind of embarrassed. But he said, but why did you apply? And in the moment, I was thinking to myself, you're going to have a harder time finding someone with a business background who's good at engineering than taking an engineer who can pick up business on the fly.
Sure, yeah.
I think, both are important skills, but in terms of like what you're going to find on the market, it's going to be much harder to find like an engineer who has good business acumen, who is empathetic, a good people person. And then I would also say you need to have executive presence and the ability to articulate, because you are your boss's doppelganger, your boss's shadow. And in many cases, presenting to senior leadership without him as a proxy, you may need to talk to the CIO or the CEO one-on-one and actually have a quality conversation, not crack under pressure, right?
Right.
Stand behind your boss's beliefs, right? So that executive presence is so critical. And I would say I learned most of that on the job at American Express, but I was very lucky that my boss then took a chance on me because I felt like I could learn those skills on the job.
Yeah.
But I had the fundamentals of engineering, which he desperately needed.
Oh, why did he need it?
Well, I mean, he was an enterprise architect, right? So who's going to be his double in a software design meeting when he can't be there?
I guess.
Right?
Okay.
You
I guess.
tell
Are we
someone
talking about? So we're talking about American Express, or we're talking about PayPal, right?
At the moment, we're talking about American Express, but it still applies to PayPal. So get this: when you're a chief of staff, naturally you're going to have a lot of exposure to senior leadership. People will see you, and other chief of staffs will see you. Like if there's 7 C-level
a circle
executives
of chief of staffs.
Basically, anyone with the title chief in their name will have a chief of staff. Right, a CEO, a CFO, a CTO.
Right.
That's how I met my current boss at PayPal.
I see.
So as soon as my boss at Amex left, my current boss who's at PayPal tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, are you looking for a chief of staff gig for me? I was like, why not? And so that's kind of how it came about. And I definitely attribute a lot of my career to luck. I think, I was very blessed that like these leaders took a chance on me. And I think, part of it goes down to, right, just sending those applications out, even if you're not sure, right? Like I did not qualify. If I looked at that list, I don't have an MBA. I don't have like 5 years work experience. It seems so foolish. But, these leaders who are looking for a chief of staff, they need that chemistry. They need that fit because there's a lot of people out there, right? A lot of people, like you said, who may have the qualifications, but there's like a human connection. You have to have like that personal relationship with that leader for them to say, I think this person is the person for me. It's like finding a significant other.
No, yeah, I love that. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, especially for someone that is like they confide in you and they really have to trust you too. Yeah, man, that makes a lot of sense to me. Because, you can't always work well with everybody, even if they have the right qualifications. And it's hard to trust someone, even at that level, right, of the C-suite people. And I feel like, the chief of staff becomes one of your closest people. So
yeah, it was insane. I was like talking to like my boss at like 1 a.m. about the most random stuff, right? Just like talking about like life struggle. It wasn't even work related. I was like, what have we become? Like we're best friends at this point.
So cool. So cool. Okay, so I have to ask, like you kind of mentioned you didn't always set out to be chief of staff to somebody. So can you take me back, like even to like high school? Like what was the journey for you? Did you always want to go into software engineering?
So I did not. I think in high school, I was very all over the place. Um, maybe if I rewind a little more, I knew as a kid I liked building stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I liked toys like any kid does, and things like train sets or Legos. Like I was big on those. Uh, in high school, I spent most of my time playing video games. I think that a lot of your viewers will relate to that.
Yeah.
Maple Story, if you've heard of that game,
Yes.
I sank so many hours in that game, like just life wasted. But actually, one thing that I did in Maple Story specifically, though, was I spent a lot of time hacking that game just for fun.
Huh.
I was just interested in like how can I cheat at this video game so that way I could get like all the strong items or level up faster. So that was kind of a side gig. But in high school, like my grades were not good. I didn't really care. I was very awkward. I was very introverted. I got bullied a good amount. And I don't think I really knew what I wanted to do, but a lot of influence came from my parents. So my mom, who is also a software engineer, she's a systems engineer. She works in IT. You know, she was saying, "Hey, it's like junior year. You better start like figuring out what you want to do. Like, go to apply to some schools. Like, do something in STEM. Like, it's reliable, right?" And so I applied to a bunch of schools, but you know, for major, like I didn't know what I was doing. I figured like engineering makes sense. I was too squeamish for medicine. Law didn't interest me, right? So I was like, okay, engineering sounds fine. In fact, I put civil engineering.
David's civil.
Oh, okay. So like city planning and all that stuff.
He's structural, but
Got
in
it.
the civil department. But
like that was my major going into Georgia Tech. Like I'm pretty sure I just took a dart and like threw it at the board. And I was like, oh, it's civil engineering. Like, let's go for it.
It's safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I was like, I don't know. And also, I mean, I was so foolish back then, but I didn't know how much debt I would incur from going to college. I mean, I graduated with like over 6 figures of debt, and it was all loans.
Crazy.
Like we couldn't pay for it out of pocket. We didn't have that kind of money. So had to take out the loans for it. But at the time I was like, Georgia Tech's a good school, and it's one of the schools that accepted me. I didn't want to stay local. I think I had a desire to kind of like forge my own path. And, you know, everyone was going to like that local school in New Jersey, Rutgers, right? So I was like, I think I want to do something different, like kind of want to trailblaze a little bit. I think part of it was also just trying to escape my hometown. Like I was an awkward kid. I was really like a big loser. Like that I don't know how else to explain it.
Seems like so hard for me to believe, but I
totally
get it.
Was. I still am.
No.
but like, you know, like you're that teen who just like doesn't know what they want. Sure. You're not comfortable in your own skin, right? You feel insecure about everything, and that was totally me. So just ended up going to Georgia Tech on a whim. Like grades were just good enough to get by. I'm not smart. Like I can assure you that. So if someone's struggling with grades right now, like any of your viewers, like work hard, but like don't feel like discouraged if your grades aren't good. I always joke like when all my friends graduated, you know, they have those like honor cords and stuff like that. Yeah, I didn't have one of those. So I used to like ask people, how'd you get those ropes around your neck? And they were like,
look at you now, Gabe. Look at you now.
I still don't have one. but and then one of my friends recently was like, doesn't everyone get them? I was like, hello.
That's funny.
But I ended up going to tech, and it was on day one actually, where, you know, you have that freshman orientation and you get those name tags and it's like, hello, my name is blank and I major in blank. I was told at that moment, this is your last chance to change your major. And so I wrote, hello, my name is Gabe, and I majored in, and I thought about it for a second and I was like, okay, what is civil engineering? It's like city planning, it's structural engineering, it's like building stuff. And I was like, I don't think I like that. So on the fly, I just thought, well, what do I like? And I knew I liked video games. I knew I liked hacking Maple Story, right? I did not know what that would mean as a career, but I was like, let's go with computer engineering. And so I just wrote it. Totally like unplanned, right? My mom was in like IT. She was an engineer too. So I think there was some influence there. It's like, oh, can't go wrong if you follow in mom's footsteps, right? So I just wrote it down and then graduated. So that was like the first step. So before I get into like the career part, I guess, and any thoughts on like the school part?
Yeah, I mean, so since it was kind of on the fly,
Hmm.
when you started taking your classes for computer engineering,
Hmm.
was it, I mean, like, okay, I have this very vivid memory. I think it was before like we like met, like me
Hmm.
and you, but do you remember um a guy named Sang? Do you remember Sang?
Last name Lee or something else?
Well, there's Sangbum and Sangyup.
Okay, are you talking about Sangbum?
No, or
Okay, then
am
I.
I? Yes, I am. Sangbum. He's
Okay,
like
okay.
he's a doctor now. He has a PhD and like,
Don't remember,
okay,
but
like don't quote me on all this, but anyways, he. I just remember my David and then like a
mhm.
whole bunch of other people in a
Uh-huh.
dorm room, and Sangbum was like tutoring them like
Oh wow.
in their CS class
Uh-huh.
because everyone was like, so David had never been exposed to like computer engineering or computer science when he grew up in Brazil, and so
Okay.
he was like, he regrets it now, he like wishes he could do it now, but I just remember it being everyone felt very challenged in this
Uh-huh.
class. So like when you started taking, is that a similar experience for you, or
Oh
you were
yeah.
like, this is
I
easy, or
No, no, no. I can't emphasize enough. When I graduated, no rope. Like
yeah.
there was grades were not good. I failed a few classes. I had to retake a few classes.
Uh-huh. So it's
Um,
a hard, it's a challenging major is what you're saying.
I mean, and challenging is, I know, like unique to the individual, right? Some
Yes.
people are going to be like, "This is insanely easy." My
Yeah.
wife's insanely smart, right? She gets A's, right? For me, it was challenging, but I think in after freshman and sophomore year, because you take your like core classes first, right, and then
Okay.
you get exposed to the major classes, and
Okay.
dang, was I bad at those major classes. Um, but you kind of realize like, well, what are my goals in life? And sometimes you need to make a sacrifice, and you can't always do what you love for a living. Like I love actually cinematography. Like I like making videos. I also like dancing, right? But when I think about like what are my long-term goals, and one of my goals was, well, one, I need to pay off all this debt that I signed up for. Like that's the financially responsible thing to do,
Yeah.
and eventually like establish a family, right?
Mm,
And so to do that, maybe I need to see this engineering thing through.
sure.
And
Yeah.
hopefully, all the studies show like if you graduate with a CS degree, you should be able to make like six figures at some point in your life,
Hmm.
right? It's a very financially stable career. So I was like, okay, like if I survive by some like miracle, maybe I'll be able to get a job like that, pay off this debt, and live a pretty good life. So
Nice.
you're kind of growing up. You're like 19 or 20 years old, and you kind of do have those questions of, well, what do I want to do? And I think at the top of my list was establish a good family, and I
Mm,
was willing to do whatever it took to reach that goal. And part of
yeah.
that is being financially stable.
Yeah. Yeah. So mission accomplished at the computer engineering like level of getting your degree.
Yeah,
No ropes, but it's okay
yeah,
because
yeah.
no one
It's fine.
asks
Yes,
after.
nobody asked. No GPA on my resume. It's
Yes,
enough.
exactly. You guys, actually, this is very important. Young people, like, seriously, no one asks you your SAT score after you graduate high school.
Grades don't
Nobody
matter.
cares.
Yeah. Actually, small tangent because you hinted at it with David, but a lot of studies show, and my company also, and my team is very invested in this. A lot of studies show that people who come from other disciplines and then choose to pivot into CS make for better engineers in the workplace than people who graduated with CS degrees.
Really?
So we will totally entertain a like law student or someone who went to med school or someone who's a civil engineer and says, "Hey, I want to get an entry level job at Amazon. I want to get an entry level job at PayPal." Right? We'll totally look at that resume, and if they're willing to go through like a boot camp for 4 months, 5 months, we will totally hire that person. And statistically, they will make for very good engineers. I think it's because they bring like outside perspective, and so
Mm.
it doesn't matter how old you are, if you're like 30 years old, 40 years old. If you wanted to do like a 6 month boot camp, right? Just take some CS courses, and then you wanted to be an entry level developer at one of these tech companies, it's totally possible.
Wow, that's really good to know. And I know David's going to listen to this and be like, hmm.
I'm so serious. Like companies are finding out that like people who bring these external perspectives actually make for better products. in these tech
Wow.
companies because you're thinking outside the box, right? You're thinking of like, what does that mean to me as maybe like a doctor? What does that mean to me as a structural engineer? And a lot of the stuff we talk about in enterprise architecture is very analogous to probably what your husband does.
Mm-hmm.
When I describe the role, sometimes I say like, if you're gonna write good software, it's kind of like building a good house, right? You got to
Yeah.
use like you got to follow like the National Electric Code for one example. Like you can't just wire up your house and hope the lights turn on. Same
Right.
thing for
Right.
software. Like you got to build it right. So
Mm.
it's very
I
cool.
mean, no, I appreciate you even bringing that up though, because I feel like a lot of people just need permission.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, me, I'm not a big risk taker,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I feel like that it just you saying it is sounds risky.
Mm-hmm.
However, I feel like you also saying that really encourages whoever's listening
Mm-hmm.
to not be scared to try.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I would almost say the risk is low. Like the ROI is so good. You could these boot camps that exist today are very self-paced. So if you took like one course a month
Mm-hmm.
on your own time and
Mm-hmm.
finished in a year, uh, you could totally quit your job at the end of that and apply to some jobs and land that tech job that you might have always wanted. Also, engineering is not as glamorous as people think, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much like a grunt work kind of thing. Like you go to work, you code, you go home, right? And
Mm.
because of that, it's kind of like a trade. You don't actually need a degree for it. I always tell my team, if you find like a guy who dropped out of college, dropped out of high school, but writes amazing code, like you hire that person,
Right. Yeah.
right? They
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
skills. Who cares like if they didn't go to Harvard? Who cares if
Yeah.
they didn't go to Georgia Tech?
Yeah.
They know what to do, and that's what matters.
Mm. Wow, that's so interesting. Like literally you're saying the like even me, I'm like thinking about my own kids, like Eli
Mhm.
and Zoe, and it's like will there be college? Like, by the time cuz it's like it's so true. I think if you just know what you're doing and love it, you
Mhm.
can be really good at it whether you have the
Yeah.
background or not. But anyways, a whole nother conversation. But
Yeah.
okay, so after you graduate,
Yep.
what started happening for you? Because I feel like computer engineers are a hot ticket.
Mhm.
I feel like the opportunities would be endless. But is that true or is that a myth or?
I would say job security is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I applied to a bunch of places, got a couple offers. I ended up going to AT&T for my first job as a network design engineer. So closely related. I think that's one of the benefits of having a software degree.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody watching was like, oh, I want to have very good job security. Really, it's like tech or medicine are kind of the ways to go, or
Yeah.
STEM
Right.
fields. So I got a job offer at AT&T. It's not a fan company. It's not glamorous, but my goal was like, I go back to like, what are my goals in life? What are my values? And I definitely had to tackle the student debt. So I wasn't going to wait around for the perfect job at like a dream company, right? Everybody wants to say I went to Google or I went to Microsoft or I went to Apple, right? After like a couple of months, you're like, this is the best I've got. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to take it. I'm going to run with it. Started working, not too passionate about it, but I'm a hard worker, so that's fine. It pays the bills, it pays the debt, right? Did that for a couple of years, and then I moved to New York. Still with an AT&T, I did an internal move, and I started doing RF engineering, which is still related to network engineering. Probably not too important to get into the details of, but like we design cell sites so that way you
Okay.
can
Okay.
use
Okay.
yeah. So you can use your cell phone, right?
Yes. Yes.
New York's actually a fascinating place to do that because it's so cluttered and there's so many people.
Oh,
So
I
it
guess
is more
so.
challenging. Like in Georgia, you just put the big tower up
Yeah.
and then you can make
Yeah.
your phone calls. New York's a little more complicated. But that was actually where I had kind of a toxic relationship with my manager. And
Oh, that's
so
tough. Yeah.
kind of got fed up. I'd been with AT&T for 3 years, and I would say I took one of the biggest risks of my career, which was quitting without an offer lined up. I was just sick of it. My boss was micromanaging me, did not have fun going to work. Every day you like dread like just waking up because you have to sit in that office for like 8 hours, right? So at some point, I had been applying, but nothing was biting, and I was just done.
Mm.
So I put in my resignation. Uh, and a lot of the things that I was saying earlier about like you have job security, it's a struggle, but I think having a tech background helps. I
Yeah,
was
sure.
unemployed for 3 months, and there were some very big lows during that time.
Mm,
But 3 months of unemployment in the big picture is not that bad. And if you plan appropriately for it, you can get through it. You
yeah.
should have some savings and stuff like that. I still had debt, but
Mm-hmm,
I was
mm-hmm.
gonna live.
Yeah.
Actually, for anyone who may be like struggling with should I quit my job, it goes back to like weighing those risks. And there was one day specifically while I was unemployed where I was just like crying. I was having a really bad day. I was like, nobody's hiring me, like nobody's interviewing me. I was like, what's
Yeah.
wrong with me? Why did I quit
Right.
my job? And my mom happened to be visiting the city on that day. And so, I met up with her. I wasn't crying, obviously, but I just said, hey, mom, how's it going? And I don't know, like mom's intuition, but like she just said, like, you look so sad right now. Like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I basically said, it's been like 3 months. Like, nobody's hiring me. Like, what's going on? I
Mm,
thought I had a CS degree. It'd be easy. I'm like studying. I'm like doing whatever it takes. I'm sending like hundreds of applications every day. And she basically gave me the comfort of if things don't work out, it's going to be okay because mom's here. Like
mm.
it's kind of that saving grace, and uh, that really put like a lot of relief on my mental state. And we're really blessed if we have families who are always going to be able to like take you home and feed you, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
if you do have that privilege, like that's such a blessing. Like don't take it for granted, right?
Mm,
Because when things go really bad, like mom and dad are going to be there for you. And
yeah.
so she gave me that confidence boost, sent a few more applications out, and one of those applications was that random application to American Express for that cheapo staff role.
That is so crazy. I mean, like, I appreciate your transparency, Gabe, because, and you addressed it. I was going to ask, I feel like when it comes to working and like, because you said it's nice to go in and love your job, but you
Mhm,
don't, that's not always, and most likely you're not going to always find like something you're passionate about. That
mhm,
is a goal of my podcast, honestly,
mhm,
because I want people to be able to do that. But sometimes it is just about the grind and the hustle, right? Um, but I guess I was going to ask you, how did you know, like, you know what, like, I can't do this anymore. Like
mhm.
I can only grind it out so much. And
Yeah.
I think I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I don't know how you feel about it, but I remember my first job,
Mhm.
I hated my life.
Oh no. Are they
and
listening?
and then I'm not going to say any names, but like um I I just thought like that's what working was. Like, and so I
Mhm.
just kept going, but I
Yeah.
was miserable. And then I remember the same conversation, maybe similar to you and your mom.
Mhm.
But I had it before I quit. And
Mhm.
I remember calling my mom finally and just being like crying. And my
Oh.
mom was like, "What is wrong?" And I said, because she thought I was fine, I had a job, everything was great. And then
Mhm.
I was like, "Mom, I hate going to work."
Mhm.
And she's like, "Quit. What are you doing? Just quit." Like that's not why, Um so I again, my personality, as I mentioned earlier, I need like permission sometimes
Uh-huh.
to do things like that. But for you, I'm curious, like was it just like a really bad day and you were like,
Mm.
"I'm done," or what, did any revelation come or
I think it was a lot of things at once.
mm,
I am a risk averse person,
mm,
actually. So it's kind of crazy to say that I quit my job without something lined up. But, I had to look at what are my responsibilities and obligations. And if you're young and if you're in your 20s, you probably have a little more leeway and risks you can take. Like now's the time to quit a job without
yeah.
something lined up, right? It's better to like turn the ship like earlier in the course rather than like last minute, right? So if you're at your job, you're having a terrible time. I was having a terrible time. Take some precautions. I had like a safety net of money in case, and actually that safety net was for 3 months. I was like, if at the end of 3 months I run out of money, well, I guess I'm not eating. But
Mm,
those are some of the precautions you can take to help mitigate that risk.
Yeah.
Obviously, nothing is guaranteed in life,
Right.
but, kind of be wise about it. I would, have a different perspective if, for example, I have a child, right? Like if I had to provide for someone, if someone was dependent on me and their life was dependent upon my income, maybe I wouldn't have had that luxury.
Right.
So I still go back to evaluate the risks, see what you can do to prepare to mitigate those risks. And then, if things, the ROI is worth it, take the leap, right?
Yeah.
Like just quit, see how it plays out.
Yeah.
And hopefully things will be in your favor.
Well, for you, it sounds like the risk was worth it.
Mhm.
We already talked kind of about what your role was at American
Right.
Express and currently. I'm curious, was there a learning curve for you as you started your job at American Express as chief of staff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think imposter syndrome is
Oh,
definitely so
fake it
painful.
till you make it.
I walked in there, and as my boss's chief of staff, you get that respect and you get that attention from people who are like, this is the guy's shadow. Like this is the
Right.
guy's second in
Like
command.
do people suck up to you and stuff?
I'm sure they have.
Yeah.
A couple of times. I can see through
No
it,
doubt,
right?
no doubt.
Some people set up meetings with me and they're just like, hey, I just wanted to tell you about what I'm doing. I was like, yeah, I get it. I know what this is about.
I love it. I love it.
But it felt like the shoes were so big when I showed
Sure.
up. And my boss also had some expectations because I had that grandiose gesture of like, I can
That's
learn on the
right.
job, right?
Mm.
I got you covered on the engineering side. I got to learn the business side.
Mhm.
But he was patient with me. Had some tough times. Had to ask a lot of questions, and I think that's key, right? Nobody actually hires you because you're overqualified. People expect you to actually have to learn on the job. Otherwise, they would hire you as the CTO, right?
Mhm,
The reason
mhm.
they hire you at a specific level is because you belong at that level and you can grow at that level. If you were
Mhm.
actually above that level, they would hire you at the next level, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So when I came in, a lot of learning, a lot of tough conversations, a lot of questions. But I would say anyone who's willing to learn, and maybe that goes back to interdisciplinary backgrounds, right? As an engineer, you're kind of expected to be inquisitive. You're kind of expected to ask questions and to continuously learn. Like that's part of
Sure.
software. Technology is always evolving.
Mhm.
So I think that background helped me adapt to the business side. It's like I'm just learning another programming language, but it's about money. Or I'm just learning another process. It's about hiring. Like I could
Right.
figure that stuff out. Actually, what I think is still more important is learning how to interact with a team.
Mm.
As the chief of staff, you're very influential and you have a lot of oversight over individuals. You may not be their direct leader, but in a way you are because you are your boss, right?
Right.
So learning like what makes a good leader, what makes a good manager, what are like the do's and don'ts were very important. I give a lot of credit to that actually to KC3 and Impact and Advanced team, right? You said something very flattering in the beginning about leadership. And I think like everything that we did with Sunjangship and discipleship, leading a dance team and corralling like 30 people together onto a common vision, like isn't that what our bosses do every day in a different way, right?
Yes.
So I give a lot of credit to that experience.
No, yeah. I mean, I definitely see that. And I think, ministry, it teaches us a lot of things in leadership, but also in like it's very humbling,
Mhm.
especially I think when you put the God aspect into it, honestly, because it's
Right.
like your extension of leadership is coming from this place of grace,
Mhm.
yet you still are in charge of people. So it's like
Yeah.
very like, yes, I get what you're saying, but yeah, that's awesome. That's really great. I'm curious, like, what is the most challenging part of your job currently?
Ooh, man, it's all over the place. I would say feeling the gravity of an organization on your shoulders.
Man, that's so
Um,
deep. I didn't didn't expect you to say that. Thought it was gonna be more like technical, but
no,
yeah.
because like it goes back to like technology, you can learn it.
Yeah.
Like business processes, you could pick it up, right?
Yeah.
I think if you have a mind to learn, like you'll figure it out. What I personally struggle with is just knowing that there's a team of 500 whose day-to-day responsibilities, whose career aspirations, whose goals in life, just as important as my own, hinge upon like some of the decisions I choose to make and that my
Yeah.
boss chooses to make. If my boss and I decide to let someone go, that is someone's whole livelihood impacted. If
Mm,
my boss and I decide, you know what, we're not going to work on this, we think this is the right project to work on for the next 3 to 5 years, that steers the company's direction, right? And what our prospects are as a payments company. So all of those heavy decisions, I think sometimes can get to me.
mm,
There's a lot of weight. Like I do this thing where I'm just in the shower and I'm just like, I'm lost. Like I'm just thinking,
mm,
like the water's hitting me, my eyes are like
mm.
bugging, and all I can think about is like, do I do this or do I do that? Do I do this or do I do that? Like pros and cons, like constantly weighing, because like these aren't decisions that are just like, what am I going to eat for lunch? These are decisions of like, should PayPal acquire a company, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Billions of dollars at stake, engineers' livelihood at stake. And
Yeah.
so those are the kind of things that I would say make it challenging.
Yeah. That's heavy, man.
But I mean,
Super
like,
heavy.
I think those decisions, and whether you work at like any other profession or you're just a human being, those decisions actually help you grow the most. And
Mm,
I wouldn't be surprised if you as a mom made some of those tough decisions, right? Like, do I give up my job to become a mother, or you know, what is this going to mean for my family? And anybody who's at those special crossroads in life, like those times are few. And so when you do find yourself in those challenging decision moments, I would say lean into it, because you're
mm.
going to grow a ton from those special like decision points.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely sound advice to what you're saying, and I am in complete agreement because, I mean, it's those pain points where we grow the most, and it's hard to get through them
Yeah,
and face them, but you really have no choice because
yeah,
it's your job. So,
exactly. I signed up for it. Yay.
no, I'm just kidding. But yeah. Okay, so what is the thing you like most about your job?
Okay, so I figured this question was coming, and I think it's I don't like software engineering, right? We talked about this. Like I just did it, right?
Hmm.
I actually, on that note, if anyone's wondering, like I want to pursue my dream, right? Like things I enjoy most are video games and video editing. But I don't like, it's strange, but like I don't want to pollute those things by making it a job,
Mm,
right? Like I've had to
mm,
do that before. I've had to edit videos for people that I didn't want to like do it as a job. And that process wasn't fun. Like I want to do it on my own time with my own vision. And so, you know, that's just a tangent. But if anyone's saying like I have to do what I enjoy, otherwise like I won't be happy, like no, sometimes it's good to keep those things sacred, right? But what I enjoy the most is kind of related to what I hate about the job. I think it's just leading people, and
mm.
I think I enjoy corralling people behind a vision. I think I enjoy uh, bringing people along and saying like this is what we can do to be very successful. And I love seeing my engineers thrive and grow. Like when they get promoted, like I feel like I got promoted. And when people get raises, like I feel like I got a raise. And when we like smash a project, we beat deadlines, and like customers are like using this new product and they're loving it. It's just like it's just this feeling of like, you know, I'm not passionate about making money move. Like that's who cares. But when I see the team, people who are passionate about seeing the money move, like when I see those people, their faces light up, and when I see their careers prosper and they celebrate, then I feel like I did my role as the chief of staff and as their leader, because I helped them accomplish something they wanted to do.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I mean, I'm just obsessed in general with like the concept of investment into people,
Mm-hmm.
seeing the fruits, but also the mobilization for one cause. Like, I mean, it's like amazing,
Yeah.
that feeling. So I totally resonate. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, actually, sorry, this is a really random question. It's
Yeah.
not related to what we're talking about currently, but I'm curious about like the Asian American representation in
Mm-hmm.
your field of work. Like not necessarily like um software engineering,
Mm-hmm.
but even just like chief of staff to C-suite level people.
Right.
Yeah, are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah. I think it is a conversation that comes up naturally at this level. Conversations about diversity and inclusion, they're a must. Uh,
Mm.
all of these different companies are trying to find ways to be more inclusive and be more accepting. Uh, I would say in tech companies, there's a fair amount of Asian representation. Um, Asian male representation, if I have to be specific. I don't want to say anything that gets me in trouble, but I think it's important to always think of ways we could be more diverse and more inclusive.
Mm.
That is actually a very contentious conversation that comes up in the workplace very often because there's these conversations of should we have quotas, right? Should there be a certain ratio of female engineers to male engineers? I think those conversations are very difficult because we want to be those inclusive companies, but we don't want to. We don't want to be in those conversations where it's like, do I sacrifice skill just to
Yeah.
meet a quota? Right? Do I pass up on good people just because I had to hire a certain minority race just to meet a certain number?
Mm.
Right? My philosophy has always been you hire the right people for the job and you lean into optimizing for diversity. But I have seen the opposite in a wide variety of companies where it's just here's your number. I don't care what you do, just meet it. And I think it's part of my role as a chief of staff to keep my leader in check, to keep other C-level executives in check, and say that is not the right way to think about diversity.
It's not always just black and white, I guess.
Yeah, it is not.
Yeah. No, because like, I think in my head, oh, that makes sense, a quota, to
Mm-hmm.
keep everything fair and balanced. But
Mm-hmm.
then, yeah, you could be sacrificing someone that is totally good for the job.
Yep.
Um, but because you have to meet these quotas, which seems silly. It seems so silly saying it out loud, but
It does, and it's let's just say women in tech, right?
mhm.
There is a low ratio of women in tech compared to men. That's just the reality of it. That's what the data shows. That's not to say they aren't out there. That's not to say there aren't female software engineers. I think we need to find them. We need to hire them. We need to go to conferences like Grace Hopper. We need to go to African American based hiring events, right? We need to lean into those avenues and channels. That way we find the right people. And our chances of hiring those people will be greater if we have a good company with good culture, right? That's very inclusive. But let's say you did all that effort and it's the end of the year and you haven't hired a female engineer, you haven't hired an African American or an Asian engineer, you still need to get the work done. And so I encourage you to hire someone who's qualified for the job, because at that point, you're harming your company's progress for the sake of trying to meet a quota. If you were intentional and you tried, I give you that pass. If you said, you know what, I don't care, I'm lazy, like
Right,
let me just
right.
hire the best person, then you do not get any credit for that.
No, yeah, that makes sense. Oh man. Well, so much to talk about. Gabe, was there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on our the end of our time together. I don't want to keep you
Sure.
forever, which
No
I
worries.
could, but I'm not going to.
No worries.
um,
No worries.
but I always ask my guests, do you have any advice for somebody that is listening and that's like, man, this sounds like something that I'm interested in, I want to do?
Mhm.
Or do you have any life advice at all?
Ooh, okay. Let me think on that for a second.
Yeah.
Um, I would say life is, and this is going to be kind of a counter to your whole podcast, but
No.
life is so much more than just your career. And I
Yeah.
think your career is one piece of it that can help you in achieving your goals. It was actually, I'm privileged to say that early on, I kind of knew what I wanted in life, which was like, I want to establish a good family, I want to be financially secure, I want to be a good husband, right? Like those are kind of my pillars. And if I'm not doing something that's contributing towards one of those three pillars, I shouldn't be doing it, right? I also like, I want to have fun. Like I want to have a good time, but I want to enjoy what life has to offer, but like not over index on that, right? Like I can't just play all day. Like I have to do work if it means being financially secure, if it means having a family, if it means, you know, living in a house and all of that good stuff, feeding myself, right? Like all of those things you need to take responsibility for. And you can choose like the career that makes that work for you. It's a plus if it's something you enjoy, but you know, life isn't always that easy. It doesn't always go the way you want it to. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is think about like what really matters to you in life and what can you do to accomplish those goals. And for me, chief of staff, software engineering, like whatever it was, that was my path to achieve some of those goals. I don't think I'm done. And I think in a couple of years' times, like I could be doing something totally different. I've thrown around the idea of like opening a cafe, right? Like that sounds like so fun, right? More fun than being a chief of staff.
With Gabe.
Talk to me in like 5 years,
Yeah.
maybe I'll have done it. Like that sounds awesome. Sounds a little more fun. But you know, I would be doing that in hopes that I'm still achieving my goal of having a good family,
Yeah.
and trying to enjoy life, right? So I guess that's my advice. Also, there's this happiness framework. I don't know if anyone has talked about it before, called Ikigai, but it's like a Venn diagram of like 4 circles.
Okay.
And so it's what you're good at, what you love, what the world will pay you for, and what the world needs, right?
Oh.
And if you somehow do something that hits all 4 circles in the middle, you should be very happy because you're doing something you love, the world's paying you for it, the world's needing it, and you're good at it.
Okay. That makes sense.
Strangely enough, I think I'm kind of at an intersection of some of those circles.
Oh.
I would say I'm fairly good at my job. I don't know how it happened, but a lot of investment from like leaders and stuff, right? A lot of investment from my parents, right? Who did everything to leave everything behind and come here. So I would say I'm pretty good at my job. Do I love it? Kind of, right? It goes back to what we talked about earlier. Like I love seeing people mobilize. I love seeing people achieve their goals. Does the world need it? I guess so, because the company hired me. And are they paying me for it? Yeah, they are. So yeah. I'm like fairly happy with where I am today. I still think there's more to life, but you know, for anyone who's wondering like, what is it going to take for me to be happy? It is that intersection of those 4 things.
Yeah, awesome. Man, all of that is like so rich, and I love that. I love that you said, I know you said it's counterintuitive to what this podcast is all about, which is true. However, you know, I think what you said is the most important, right? Like we are living for more than just like our identity shouldn't be found in what we do, right? But maybe even just how we do it and our character and what we are living for. Yeah, I feel like is the bigger picture. So, Gabe, thank you so much again. I hate to put you on the spot, man, but if there's anybody that maybe has questions for you, would you be
Absolutely.
open?
Yeah. Give the socials or whatever, and anyone can reach out to me, talk about anything. Software engineering, chief of staff life, just general, anything. Happy to talk.
Yeah, and I can attest to Gabe being an open person because, man, I feel like you've always come through for me. I don't know if you like realize this, but you're so open and so friendly and so approachable. And I'm sure the people that work for you feel the same way. So yeah, guys, don't be afraid to reach out, and I'll definitely connect you in the best way possible. So, Gabe, thank you again. You guys, if you have any questions or you just want to reach out, feel free to DM me through social media, or you can email me at podcastwigu@gmail.com. Gabe, thank you again. I appreciate you, and congratulations on just everything that you've been doing so far.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
Bye, guys. Until next time.